Well, it's been a bit, and you're probably wondering, why has it been so long, Aaron, since you've sat down to record a podcast under your A deLayed writer heading? And the answer is, I've been busy writing. So the last podcast that we had for a deLayed writer was August 3rd, 2022. And in that time, I've done a lot of revising, I've done a lot of work, to the point now where the novel that I have been working on since 2019, September of 2019, if you can believe it, is ready. But there's more to that. It's not just that it's ready to go, but it's complicated. So stick with me, because what we're about to talk about is a first-time writer, which is me, grappling with a massive monster that is the publishing industry and trying to figure out what to do, where to go, how to do it, and also while holding down a full-time job. You may be intrigued, you may be amused, you may be horrified. I don't know what your reaction will be. But when we come back here on A deLayed Writer Podcast, it's episode 3, and it's going to be published. Let's go. My name is Aaron, and this is the A deLayed Writer Podcast, episode 3. It's been nearly a full year since I've sat down and talked through the process of being me as a writer. So, to kind of fill in the missing pieces, obviously, since we last talked, my last episode was entitled Blocked, and I was talking about creative writer's block and how do I get through it and all the things. And well, in a year's time, I've come to the point where my first time novel, my debut novel, if you will, is finished. It's gone through the editing process. It's gone through revisions. It's gone through cleanup. It is in that place where it needs to be put out in the world. It is in its finished product, and it needs to go. So, if you're familiar with the writing world, if you're familiar with how this works, you have two choices. I mean, there's obviously more choices. Publishing in 2023 is very much like a Swiss Army knife in how it works. But what I know and what I went through with my editor is there were two primary choices, I should say. First choice was to go through the process of submitting my story to an agent and going through the process of submitting to a lot of agents, because you don't get your first agent on your first try or your second try or your third try. It takes upwards of, from my understanding, 50 to 100, and even more than that sometimes, and that would have probably been mine, because the world of publishing is not what it used to be. It is incredibly competitive. There's almost a glut of writers who are just submitting everything, and so to get the attention of an agent, you really have to work at it. And unfortunately, I have a full-time job. I'm a teacher. I teach high school English in a district and here in rural Colorado, and we are on 4-day weeks, and so we are cramming 5 days into 4 days, and so I am constantly busy. We're working hard. We're working long hours, and it's really been hard to try and get myself into that ability and that time to sit down and just submit, because you have to have a query letter. You have to really work at it. Each individual submission has to be crafted very carefully and very specifically to the agent that you're submitting to. And I'm still learning, and it's very hard. And I wish it was easier for me, and I wish that I could just sit down on a weekend and just plow through it, but sometimes that's just not the thing I can do. And so my struggle for the last several months, since about probably June or July, has been that kind of push and pull. Do I self-publish through Amazon KDP? or do I really work hard to get a hold of a publishing house? Because the thing is, if an agent gets it and likes it and shops it around, and she finds a publishing house that's like, wow, this is really great, we want this author, let's sign them, let's make a deal. The reality is I have 3 or 4 other stories that I'm writing and or in development, in various pieces of development. So if it goes to a publishing house and they get the book, they take the book, I sign off on it, they pay me money, it goes into printing and all the things that happen there. They would then have the ability, generally negotiate for first in line to see the next story that's completed and see if they want to take it and run with it and publish it if my first book is successful with them. And that would be ideal for me because, I've got other stories I'm writing, and they're not short stories, they're novels, they're big ideas. But that's a full-time job almost in itself. And yes, the agent is primarily responsible for shopping around, but getting there is hard. And it's, I'm not a young 21-year-old, 25-year-old, whatever. I'm 41, and I've got a full-time job, and I've got to make sure that I'm attending to my full-time job. And so in the mix of all that is this kind of moment of going, I don't think I can take the time necessary to really aggressively find an agent who's going to want to sift through everything that's being submitted and take this story. So this week has really been a struggle to identify what I want to do. And it was hard. Like, this week was really where I sat down in my free time, in the evening hours, and my driving into work and my drives home from work. It was really a wrestling of, what do I want to be as a writer? Do I want to really become like a part of a publishing house and have to publish and make sure that I have good stories and I'm keeping up with there's a certain amount of pressure that I feel, and it may be the wrong perception. You're probably, if you're listening out there, you're going, man, you're wrong on this. Great, tell me. delayedteacher@gmail.com. Tell me how I'm wrong, because I'm happy to hear it. But it was, for me, it was like I can't dedicate a lot of time to the pieces and parcels. I can dedicate enough time to get the story formatted for Amazon KDP, for paperback and ebook, and I can do that, and I can do that in my spare time, and I can work on kind of like sharing the pre-orders and all those things with people. Like, I can do that. My goal is not for this story to be a bestseller on the New York Times list. Would that be a dream? Absolutely. I mean, oh my gosh, I would lose my mind. But it's not what I'm going for. And so it's one of those things where I just kind of have to rely. I think I have to accept the fact that I don't want to be, a big time author. I just want to be a writer. I just want to be published, and then that's, I think, a lot of what I've been over these last couple of months, just been sitting here going, I want to be published. And not like an ebook. I mean, ebooks are cool, don't get me wrong, but I want to be able to for someone to go on Amazon or to go to a website and they can order a physical copy of something I've written, and it will be sent to them, and they can open it up and they can read my book, and that's what I want. So that's kind of where my decision has come, is that I have decided that unless chances somebody listening to this is going, well, actually, I might have an agent for you and you should do this, whatever. Great, let's talk. I mean, let's go. I mean, I'm down, but right now I'm looking to publish. So the story is called Seven Falls, and it's semi-autobiographical in some ways, but also not at all in other ways. But the story is complete, and the interesting thing about this story is I've started writing book 2, and that started today. I sat down for a little bit, and I started to kind of go, okay, what would have happened after this story? And I started doing that, and it felt natural. Mind you, it took me a minute to get back into the characters' heads and their minds and their voices and everything, and that's going to be a process. This next book... You're not supposed to cough on a podcast, are you? I have water, but this is not an ASMR podcast, so find your ASMR elsewhere, I guess. It's just not how it works here. So I've started to write book 2, and it's kind of like there's more to be told. So here it is. I'm going to publish. It's going to be through Amazon KDP unless somehow I find somebody, an agent, or I manage to figure that out. At the moment, it's going to be published. It's going to be both paperback. It's going to be both ebook. And I think for me, it's that sense of relief of being like, okay, I have a date that I'm looking to do this. I've uploaded it onto KDP. I've been editing it. I'm going to go back and clean it up a lot. Like, there's still a lot of work to be done. And part of that is this work here, is this podcast, is I'd like to amp up and hype up me and the story. The story is interesting. It's Jill Miller as the character, and it's set in a Montana town. It's called Seven Falls. It's in April, which traditionally is pretty cold. And the idea behind it is it's a story of redemption. It's a story of trauma. It's a story of hurt. It's a story of love. It's not a romance story. It's not one of those, because there's a whole genre there that I am very happy to say I am not talented enough to crack that genre. I'm happy to step aside and let the romance writers write and run that genre, and I'm going to exist in the literature and fiction world where I'm comfortable and I know what I'm doing. And the story isn't a simple story. It isn't an easy story. It's a story of hard conversations, of hard choices, and of hard histories. Part of the story is the character is a former teacher and has kind of fled the profession for various reasons. The lead character, his name is Peter Crawford. He owns a coffee shop in Seven Falls, but his history in the town is complicated, and there's layers to it. Jill Miller shows up in town. She has layers. Peter's sister, Carolyn, she has layers. She's quirky. You're going to love her or you're going to hate her. It's interesting when you write characters. The beautiful thing, you've got a good character and a good story and a good thing going when the characters take control. And it sounds odd to hear that if you're not a writer or if you're not familiar with that feeling, but when you're writing the dialogue and you're writing the narration, suddenly when the character's actions and words and everything like that, it is not your interpretation of it. It is more the character as designed and crafted suddenly grabs you as a writer and says, okay, we're going to do this now. And you're going to write this because this is what I would do, because this is how you designed me and wrote me and crafted me within my little box. I'm going to break out of that box, but we're going to make new ground, and we're going to take this story in a direction that you may not have thought it was going to go, but as a character, it has to go this way. And that I think is the fun. That I think is the fun part about writing is that you get to experience characters taking over and running. So there's some side characters in this story that play an important role. Otto is a adopted grandfather of Peter. There's Jenna. She's the wife of Otto. There's a lot of cool characters that I've created and crafted, and there's more to come with book 2. There is a pop star in the book 1, and yes, she has a connection to Peter Crawford, and I think it's interesting, and I think it has more to be told. There's a lot of emphasis in this story about orphans, and Peter Crawford is a bit of an orphan, along with Carolyn, and the pop star that we've written and created, we being me, and with the help of my editor. I think it will really have an impact. So this is important to say out loud, because I've posted it on Facebook and I've done some social media posts, but I think I verbally need to say it. I am going to publish my story, my novel, my debut novel. Again, that's just all these years later. I have spent 20 plus years writing in various formats, and I've never been able to say I'm going to be a published author. But today, December 1st, 2023, next month, I will be a published author, and you will be able to buy my book online and in paperback. And that's really exciting for me. And I'm hopeful that you will join me on this adventure as I continue, because this podcast will begin to ramp up again. My guess is that I'm going to do some talking about characters and some ideas and themes and chapters and give you some behind the scenes and some insight into the story without totally giving away the entirety. My hope is that you'll join me on this journey as we lurch towards being published with Seven Falls. My goal is also to talk to you about the other stories that I'm writing and to have you kind of know that I am not, I guess the expression would be a one-trick pony. Like, I'm not just writing a fiction story set in a Montana town. You know, it might sound like it's a Hallmark story, but it is definitely not a Hallmark story. But to also, like, let you know that I don't just write that. The other stories I've got writing, I've got a steampunk story set in steampunk New London and in the Western Wild West, with two competing characters and a third coming in, which is going to really rock your world. I'm also writing a story called The Awakening, which is all about fantasy and dragons and mythical magic and all these things. Two worlds coming crashing down next to each other again after being separated. It's a lot of fun. I think that's... I'm not a writer who sits in the horror genre or in the action genre. I like to try everything. I like to write a lot of different things. And my hope is that you join me on this journey as either a fellow author or a reader, and maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, a fan down the road. You'll begin to appreciate and engage with the material as it comes. I've also got short stories that I'm working on getting over to Amazon. So more of that information will be coming out. You can subscribe if you're like, man, I want to hear the latest email news. You can go to delayedwriter.com, and there is a subscribe button up there, and you can click on it, enter your name and your email. It'll go to me. I'll put it in an email list, and I will start updating you with all of the exciting publishing stuff as we begin the countdown. And it sounds so weird to say this, but the countdown to publishing. My apologies for the ASMR cough. These pauses are me drinking water so that I can make sure that, my voice is powered by liquidation. That didn't make any sense, but I'm not going to edit it out. So, welcome to the world of A Delayed Writer, episode 3, published in 1 month's time. A month or so. A month and maybe 10 days. I will be a published author. And that's really exciting. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I appreciate you listening. Feel free to send me feedback if you'd like. adelayedteacher@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter under adelayedteacher. And we will see you on the next episode here on A Delayed Writer podcast. More to certainly come. May the adventures and the creative worlds that you read bring you hope, happiness, and joy. And may you find, relief and comfort in those moments. Until next time, my name is Aaron, and this has been A Delayed Writer podcast. We'll see you in the bookshelves.
I can see what we are, don't know where we belong. Wanna know what you're thinking, wanna know if something's missing. Started stories before, but they ended up short. Get me up to higher places, want you to feel my pages. Is this for real?